impact. Sure, it's nice just to get the kids outside and playing in the dirt and being in the sunshine, but you know, the hours during the school day are very precious. And if we can show administrators and teachers that the experiences in the gardens have an impact on children's lives, there's a better chance we're going to be able to make these garden programs work. We all go after funding, and I've seen in the last 15 years a real shift in what the funders are asking for and what the funders want from us, as far as, you know, okay, we'll give you some money, but we want this money to be well spent, and we want this money to have an impact, and how can you assure us that this is going to happen? And a lot of us, I think, when we're asked about school gardens, we have a pretty standard answer where we say, I know gardens are important. It's important to get kids into nature. I can just see it out there. But that response is not sufficient enough anymore these days. People want to see data. They want to see impact. And so, again, knowing what the current academic research shows us is important. So, again, this project, Shakit and I started it about 6 months ago. It had three components for Shakit. First, she did a thorough literature review of what are the papers that exist out there, peer-reviewed papers that have been published in respectable journals. And her initial keywords were school gardens and cooking classes. She came up with a list of those. She selected usually the 5 or 7 from several categories, and she wrote a summary of those papers. And the summary was a bullet-pointed summary that is supposed to make it a little bit easier for garden leaders to capture the essence of the paper, so that they don't have to read the entire paper. And if you're not in academia right now, sometimes it's a struggle even to get a hold of these papers, because the journals require either memberships to their journals or certain passwords or access mechanisms. So we felt that if Shakit reviewed these papers and wrote summaries, that would be very useful for the garden leaders. And then we produced some PowerPoint slides from these papers. And we felt that these PowerPoint slides would be very useful for people that have to do a presentation in front of the school board or in front of a bunch of teachers. And they could actually borrow these slides and use them as part of their presentation. So I'm going to show you examples of those as we go through these topics. We basically chose 6 different topics to look at. The Shakit originally plugged in school gardens and cooking classes. And right away, I was interested in choices 1 and 2. You know, what are the impacts of garden programs and cooking classes on academic performance of the students, and choice behavior around fruits and vegetables, and how much were they eating, the consumption of the fruits and vegetables. These, in my opinion, seem to be the 2 major topics that always come up around gardens and cooking classes. But as Shakit got into this, she came up with some other topics and outcomes that seemed interesting, and those are highlighted on the rest of that slide there. She found a number of papers that looked at gardens as therapy, looking at social and emotional behavioral therapies using gardens, and so she wrote up a summary on that. Obesity prevention is another big topic, and of all the health outcomes around cooking and gardening, obesity prevention seemed to rise to the top as far as the number of research papers out there. Shakit's own research, her own degree in bioethics, really points her to food justice. And so she wanted to review some papers that uses school gardens to address food justice in neighborhoods. And so we've included that. And then I think she just kind of stumbled upon a bunch of papers that actually look at what are some of the best practices for having a school garden? And there are some papers written around that topic, and we have reviewed those in the study also. So what I'm going to do now is I'm not going to go through all 6 of these topics, but I've selected 3 of them to give you a short review of what is some of the academic research, and to show you some of the examples of the resources that Shakit has prepared and that we're going to be putting up on our website. So I'm going to start, again, on the website, and Lauren is physically putting these up on the website. They're almost done, and you can go check them out. They'll be under the resource tab, and you go down the resource tab, and you'll see a category Why School Garden, and you'll find these papers listed under there. But basically, for each of those topics, we've included a Word document, which is a summary of the academic papers and findings, mostly in bulleted points, so you can grab a quick bullet point that would meet your needs. And then you'll see a separate PowerPoint presentation for each of these topics with a number of slides, and I'm going to show you some examples of what those slides look like. You're welcome to download those PowerPoint presentations and use those. And we just ask that you give credit to Slow Food for those resources. And we would love to get feedback from you on how you use them and how they were received. So we're going to start first with the academic success outcome. Obviously, school gardens are in the setting of a school, and the overall mission of a school is to help the students achieve high levels of success in their academics. And if school gardens are going to have an impact on the academics of the students, then we need findings to show a connection between the learning that happens in school gardens and the learning that happens in the classroom. So the question that Shakid asked in this section are, what are the impacts of school gardens and experiential learning on the overall performance of students in subjects like science and math? And in the papers that we found, science and math were the most prevalent topic matters that were covered. But as most of us know who work in school gardens, we know we can also deal with other topics such as health, social studies, cultural studies, even art and foreign language. So, but I think most of these papers that we're going to see are dealing with science and math scores. So the first example is a paper done by Blair in 2010, and this is a review paper. This reviewed dozens of articles that existed at that point. The title of the paper, The Child in the Garden, an evaluative review of the benefits of school gardening. And, you know, being a review paper, it didn't do any original research, but it did summarize some of the findings that existed at that point. And I highlighted 3 of the findings here on this slide. I'll read the first one. 9 out of the 12 studies revealed a positive difference in test measures between gardening students and non-gardening students. School gardening increased the science scores in all reported studies. So if you were giving a presentation and a bunch of teachers and they were asking you, why should I give you my students for an hour a week, here would be a strong case to present that science scores increase when students participate in hands-on gardening in school gardens. The other 2 quotes there are equally important and show the value of school gardens. This slide here is an example of a slide prepared by Shakid, and that's included in the PowerPoint that she created. And this is meant to be a review slide of the Blair paper. And it's broken down into 3 columns. First column being just the basic details of the article. Middle column highlighting some of the outcomes that were described in the paper. And then the right-hand column on some of the main findings, and often including quotes directly from the article. This kind of slide can be used during a presentation. It is a little bit of a busy slide, so I always advise, you know, to use these in few pieces. But if you wanted to highlight some important findings, this would be a good slide to use from the PowerPoint. The next slide is a PowerPoint that Shakid produced that kind of gives a graphic demonstration of some of the findings. And again, the top of the slide shows the paper that was reviewed, and then in somewhat graphic form are some of the findings. And so this is a much less busier slide and really highlights the important findings coming out of the paper. and this can certainly be used as part of her presentation, and I don't think would be overwhelming to the audience at all. It should be noted these are original slides that Shaka produced, so these aren't slides that are coming right out of the paper, and these are slides that are meant to be summaries of the paper that she is reviewing. Under this topic of academic success, I also wanted to give an example of an actual research paper, one that did a manipulation and measured results. And so the Smith and Motensbocker paper in 2005 looked at the impact of hands-on science lessons in school gardens down in Louisiana. I should note that this paper has a special meaning to slow food, as Carl Motensbocker is a slow food leader down in Louisiana, and is part of the agricultural training programs down there. So it's exciting to see that slow food is contributing to the academic research that's involved in these topics. But in this one, what Carl did with his colleagues was to bring in a garden curriculum program into 3 elementary schools in Louisiana. The curriculum being taught by university students and master garden volunteers, and very much a hands-on garden curriculum. And I highlighted 2 results from this study. Students who participated in the program saw higher science scores on the post-test when compared to pre-test. So within the students that participated in the gardening program, they saw higher scores from a pre-test to a post-test kind of program. And the control group, and these were students that did not get the garden classes, did not see any difference between their pre and post-test scores. So this is a nice little study that shows us that if you give students weekly garden classes, I think they went on for a couple months, they actually produce increases in science scores. And if we look at the slides that Shock had produced, here's a slide from her PowerPoint that kind of gives a little description of the program on the left and a nice graphic on what the results were on the right, showing that the intervention group, the group that actually got the garden classes, had a larger impact. And I like how she demonstrated this on the seesaw. A higher impact showed a lower side of the seesaw. And I think this would be a graphic that would be understood by any of your audiences that you might give this to. So, so that kind of concludes what I wanted to share with you about the studies that Shock had reviewed on academic success. I believe there's 6 or 7 other studies in her reviews that she did, and there's a number of slides that go with it. So you'll find different kinds of studies in that section, and some might be more meaningful to you than others. The second outcome I wanted to highlight is about fruit and vegetable consumption. If you've gone after funding for school garden or any type of health program, fruit and vegetable consumption is a major measurement that a lot of funders are asking for. Previous studies have shown that fruit and vegetable consumption is correlated with better health outcomes. And it's fairly easy to measure. You can do pre and post tests on kids with fruit and vegetable consumption. You can do plate weight studies out of the cafeteria. There's a lot of different ways to measure fruit and vegetable consumption. So it seems to be one of the standards out there to measure when you're having an intervention like school gardens or cooking classes. So Shock had found a number of papers on this topic, and again, asked the question, what are the impacts of school gardens and cooking classes on the consumption of fruits and vegetables? She did find a couple review papers, and Hersch et al. 2014 is another example of a review paper. It looked at the evidence from 2003 to 2014, so pretty recent evidence, and found that cooking classes contributed to an increase in 6 different outcomes. People had more confidence in cooking when they participated in a cooking class. Their vegetable consumption increased. They became more had more self-efficacy in the kitchen and around food. Students are willing to try new foods when they participate in cooking classes. They show an increase in vegetable preferences while participating in cooking, and there's actually a dietary increase in fiber consumption after the completion of cooking classes. So one quote from the paper talks about cooking programs might positively influence children's food-related preferences, attitudes, and behaviors, although difficult to determine through which practice pathways can we reach this outcome. So if you take a closer look at that paper in Shockett's review, many papers introduce different types of interventions. It may be a gardening class, it may be a cooking class, it may be a combination of gardening and cooking, it may be a visit to a grocery store. Sometimes it's difficult to tease out which is having a bigger impact, but almost all of these types of interventions have some sort of positive effect on the students, and that's what was reviewed in this paper. Here's the example of a slide, again, that Shockett produced for her PowerPoint. Again, having those 3 columns that we saw in the earlier slide in academic success. And again, can be used to help summarize the Hersch paper if you were going to present this to a group. And then the same data in a little bit more of a graphic, simplified form with a simple statement about the details of the article, a couple bulleted points on the outcomes, and then a simple statement on the main findings. Obviously, there's much more going on in this paper than this slide indicates, but if you're making a presentation to a school board, all you need is some really simple statements to drive the point home, and this slide will give you that. So moving on to a research paper. There's a paper by Brown and Hermann in 2005 that actually manipulated cooking classes and looked at fruit and vegetable consumption in youth and adults. This was done in Oklahoma, and what they did was they introduced cooking classes to children and adults. You see the age range there. This study was implemented in 28 counties over a 2-month period in Oklahoma, over 600 participants, so it's a nice large study. And they use different types of cooking, as you can see in the bottom of the slide, using the microwave, stir fry, baking, and steaming. So it's a pretty comprehensive cooking program. The next slide will give us some idea of what was some of the outcomes. So remember, they were measuring fruit and vegetable intake, and the first two lines shows that the increase in fruit intake and vegetable intake by the participants that received the cooking classes. So if you look at the first line, the people in the cooking classes increased their fruit intake from anywhere from 1.1 to 2.3 servings a day for the youth, and 1.5 to 2.1 servings a day for adults. Those are huge increases when you consider the relatively low consumption of fruits and vegetables in the overall general public. And then the second line gives vegetable intake too. And what I found to be really interesting in the vegetable intake was it's usually much more difficult to get kids to eat vegetables than they get to eat fruit. And the cooking classes had a larger impact on vegetable intake than they did on fruit intake. So I don't remember the details of this paper, but I bet you they really featured vegetables in their cooking classes, and it had a big impact on the participants. And then they had a couple nice side effects. There was a significant improvement in food preparation practices. So there was an increase in washing hands, which is always a nice, safe practice. and there was an increase in behavior around washing food. And so I'm sure, you know, those were pleasant findings to have. They weren't the major findings. But if we're teaching kids about in cooking classes, it's also good to teach them about food safety, and the study shows some nice results. We have a couple of slides from Shakid that, again, summarize this study. Same format as before, and it gives you some really quick bulleted points on the study. And then she prepared, again, some graphic slides that give some brief descriptions of what happens in the program and some of the findings. And that's a great slide to use in a presentation that summarizes the findings overall. And she even created her own bar graphs to demonstrate the increases. So we got the bottom got cut off a little bit, but the green bars are the youth and the orange bars are the adults. And it shows the fruit consumption on the left, vegetable consumption on the right. Within each of those, the pre-study measurement on the left and the post-study on the right. And it's very obvious from this graphic that there was an increase in both fruit and vegetable consumption because of the cooking classes. This one slide alone will probably get you a number of school board members and teachers on your side around school gardens and cooking classes. So it's a great slide to use. So the last topic I want to cover on this presentation is the one that Shakid really wanted to do because of her own interest, and it's looking at what are the impacts of school gardens on food justice, food access, and knowledge in economically impacted communities. And you know, when she brought this topic to my attention, I was not quite sure how it was going to be covered in school gardens. So I was really interested to see what she would find. To the best of my memory, the 5 or 6 papers that she reviewed here, they're all general review papers. There's not much of a manipulation being done here, but there's some really interesting findings that come out of it. In particular, the one paper that I'm going to highlight in this discussion is actually from a school down in Tucson, Arizona, that Lauren and I got to visit this past spring, Monzo Elementary. It's part of the program that the Community Food Bank in Tucson and the University of Arizona are featuring as part of their efforts. It's a school of a very low income school. Far over 90% of the students qualify for subsidized lunches. It's a mixed race neighborhood, particularly Hispanic and Native Americans. But they have an absolutely gorgeous garden in the middle of a courtyard in the middle of the school. And the students get 30 minutes of lessons every week in this garden, and actually do a lot of activities in the garden. The way the students participate in the garden. The way they were going to address food justice in the study, though, was to take the garden past the students and get the parents and the community involved. The idea here is let's get this good food and all this lessons and knowledge out into the community, a community that is declared as a food desert because of the lack of fresh access of fruits and vegetables. And let's see how this garden that's located in a school can have impact on the community and get the community involved. And so I thought it was a really interesting approach to using a school garden. And I highlighted 3 findings by the study on this slide here. The way they were able to extend the garden beyond the students was they made a very strong effort to bring the adults, particularly the parents, into the garden as volunteers, as teachers, as sharers of knowledge. And they did a lot of community celebrations from the garden. And the garden became a focus for the community around healthy food, around food access. The garden committee, which is made up of teachers, and representatives from the University of Arizona and the Community Food Bank always included inviting parents to their meeting so that they could be part of the discussion and receive a lot of the information that the children receive during the school day. And so the final quote here on the bottom of the slide, I think, really brings it all together for the study, and I'll read it to you. The School Garden Program, through its partnership with the Community Food Bank of Southern Arizona, and I also include in there Arizona University, attempts not just to orient students' palates towards healthier options, but also to make fresh local food available to previously neglected populations. And so I think it's a really good statement around how school gardens can contribute to overall food justice in a neighborhood and get conversation going in the community and into the school of why there are disparities around food access and what is the right way for everyone to have equal access to good, clean, and fair food. Here's a slide, again, prepared by Shaka, that's in her PowerPoint, highlighting this study in particular. And then a graphic, again, summarizing the overall, the design of the study, and actually the middle section there describes some of the challenges that the gardens face because it's in this neighborhood, and then how the staff at Monzo and the students have overcome these challenges, and they're highlighted on the right-hand side. It's a wonderful, wonderful project, wonderful school to go visit, and quite the model that Lauren and I are looking at as far as how can we share this out and see examples of this happening elsewhere. So, but the end of my presentation, there are similar slides and reviews for those other subjects posted on our website on obesity prevention, best garden practices, garden therapy. I believe that covers all of them. So we really feel this is going to be a great resource for garden leaders, a great resource for those of you that have to write grants and are looking for short summaries of the current research out there. If you know of papers that perhaps we should know about, we'd be happy if you would send those to us, and perhaps we can include in future work reviews of those papers also. If you get a chance to use this resource, and we'd love for you to report back to us so that we can hear how this is being used and what kind of successes you're having with this resource. But I'll open it up now for Jim. Lauren's been watching the chat line, and she'll share some questions with us from there. If you've got a question that you want to speak out loud to everybody, please speak up, and we'll try to address the questions the best that we can.
Thanks, Andy. That was a great presentation, I think really informative for all of us. And actually, the resources are available on our website, and I'll just show you right here. If you go to our page, under the resources tab, we have a Why School Gardens page, and then you can move over here to current academic research, and the text summaries and PowerPoint slides are all available. And I'm just going to be working on a little bit of reformatting, but it's all there for you to use. So if there are any questions, you can go ahead and speak up or type it into the chat box, and we'll get those answered for you.
Hi, Lauren. This is Scott Lewis.
Hi, Scott.
I've got a question for you. Thank you, Andy, for that slide, for the presentation. This is going to be, I think, a very useful tool for a lot of people. So appreciate all the work that you've done with this. I've got a bit of a technical question here. I don't know if Andy may know the answer. A couple of times with respect to the descriptions about increases. One time when you were talking about the Louisiana study, you talked about increases for the experimental group, and also for the consumption. You showed a nice slide with the increases the children had in their consumption of vegetables. Do you know if that's statistically significant?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and any of those
outcomes
outcomes that we show that are different are going to be significantly different, Scott.
Okay.
We didn't include the p-values or any of the
No,
statistical jargon
right.
because I felt that would make things too complicated.
Right. No, I
But
appreciate it. I thought maybe you'd do that, but just a suggestion, if in fact people are going to use this for school boards where people might have those kinds of people that are picky like me on that, probably is
right,
worth just saying that, just put it out there. These are statistically significant findings, and just so brief one sentence like that will do the trick.
sure. Yeah, yeah. I think Lauren could add a little statement on the web page saying that all those all these differences are significant, and even just the addition of a how some papers show a star or 2 stars would indicate p-values, and that would also support that too. Scott and I are both kind of data geeks, and we appreciate statistical analysis, and I know where he's coming from. But in general, yes, you can assume that these are all significant differences.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Do we have any other questions?
Hi, this is Adrienne Mundorf down in New Orleans, and thank you so much for this great presentation and resource. This is really valuable, especially someone coming from a research institute. We're getting ready, actually this fall, to do a pretty big evaluation of the edible schoolyards down here, and so I'm hoping that there'll be some publications and I can share the findings with you. I guess I'm curious, we've done some formative research with the ESY program here, and are you also interested in peer-reviewed or conference presentations? And they're not in peer-reviewed journals, but some other resources that might lend itself to this type of information?
I think those would be very valuable to have, and because in general, that kind of research kind of is the precedent for later on peer-reviewed kind of research, and so this stuff takes time, and if you've got some early results to show us that are rigorous and that went through a process, we would be happy to share those out with other folks too, just to give an indication of what's coming up in research and what kind of topics, because I know school gardens are a hot topic these days for research, but we also know it takes time for it to happen. And so we would love to share any of that, and funding too. Funding is a challenge.
This is really showing not only the school boards but also the larger funders of the body of literature that can be added to from further research. So thank you very much for this resource.
Yeah, we would love to talk to you further offline about what you're doing down there. That'd be great.
Adrienne, thank you so much for bringing that up. Actually, at the Edible Schoolyard Summer Academy, we met your colleagues from the Edible Schoolyard Project in New Orleans as well as in New York, and they both spoke on a panel about evaluation, and we saw some slides on some of that research that's been done so far. So thanks for bringing that up, and we're excited to get more information about how we can collaborate with you.
Great, thanks.
Are there any other questions?
Okay. Well, we'd be happy to answer any questions offline. My presentation was stock full of a lot of information, and it takes some time to absorb. Take a look at the resources that Lauren's got up, and if you got any questions, you can always contact us directly. Our information's there on the screen right now. If you have contributions to this, these kind of summaries, we'd be happy to share them out and give you full credit for them. We really would love this page to be a complete resource for any kind of garden leader, school board member, principal, teacher who is looking for some of the current data. I know the National Farm School Network also has a page similar to this, and it has some really great resources on there too. So take a look at their research page also. So thanks for joining us in the middle of the summer. It is a Friday, and I'm hoping everyone has a great weekend. And we here at Slow Food are very excited that you're joining us, and we hope to see you for our monthly webinar moving forward.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.